Hi, so I'm Philly Young. I'm a specialist occupational therapist for the Northamptonshire Community Stroke team. And as Leona said, I'll be talking about how we've developed our skills for remote cognitive assessment. So just to begin, I wanted to briefly talk about how our normal process works in CST. So we receive information about a patient's cognitive ability in the referral. This includes functional task assessment and on some occasions cognition screens. CSTOTs would then complete functional task assessments in their homes and or a cognition screening tool and sometimes standardized assessments to further assess their cognitive ability. So as a whole team, we quickly had to invent a new way of working, accessing remote technology to complete assessment and treatment for our patients. And currently we're using the Attend Anywhere platform to video call our patients where able. So other ways that we've adapted. So the ward OTs have been completing more cognitive screens prior to discharge and sending these to CST for further follow-up. And we're aiming to see most patients where appropriate via video. To support the reduced face-to-face contact, assessment forms have been created by one of my OT colleagues. And this includes functional tasks which involve carers to observe the patient, fill in their form regarding their cognitive ability and feedback to the OT. Activity plans for cognition have also been created, including general exercises as well as functional tasks. This can be done with carers and can also be done during the remote sessions. So benefits, the positive outcomes that we've noticed are we've actually been able to use the setup of the platform as part of the assessment. And by doing this, we can establish if the patient can follow instruction to set up Attend Anywhere, and if they can recall how to access the platform each time. So are they retaining that information? Another benefit that's been highlighted is that by giving patients the ownership of using the video platform for their therapy sessions, it's encouraged patients to take charge of their own recovery. So rather than being reliant on therapists visiting them, they have to meet us halfway for their sessions. Carers have been able to take on much more of a therapist role to support their loved ones in their recovery, as they can be used as assistants during video calls. It's really helped carers understand cognitive deficits in more detail and how to support patients in their everyday lives. It's also noted that patients can sometimes feel like there's less pressure put on them to perform, and in some cases it feels that they're not being watched over as directly if it's via video. And as you'll see a bit later on in the presentation, there are ways of using remote technology to assess all areas throughout the cognitive hierarchy. Very quickly, just some barriers that I've come across. I personally feel that setting up the tech with the patients and carers in the first instance has been my biggest challenge. So this may require a face-to-face contact initially where we can do some cognitive assessment and then follow that up remotely. Another challenge is deciding whether the patient would benefit from remote rehab or if their cognitive deficit is too severe for them to engage. So in that case, it has been the occasional face-to-face sessions. Often when completing cognitive assessment, and this happens even in person, if carers are involved, they can give certain cues and prompts to the patient to help them be successful. And over video call, this can be more prevalent. So it's been important to explain the full process and purpose of cognitive assessment to carers, and if they're supporting, to give them a direct script to read from. It's also been a challenge for a few of the therapists to overcome not having the environment to give certain cues as a point of assessment or conversation. This is where care involvement's really key in establishing cognitive deficit. So now I'm going to go through some examples of how we've used remote cognitive assessment. So screening tools. So for the first example, using the carer as an assistant. I use the term carer quite broadly throughout the examples. It does include family member, care staff, or anyone supporting them. So I sent sections of the Addenbrooke's cognitive examination screening tool, which needed to be completed in person via email to the patient's partner. I then coached the patient's partner to be the assistant for those sections. So I gave her specific instruction of what she needed to say and advised her not to give any prompts or help to the patient. I then set up a video call with the patient and the partner and followed through with the cognitive screen. I prompted the partner to do the sections she had when required. Once finished, she then sent me the sections back via email and I marked in feedback later on. Completing by telephone. So I have done this. It can be less valid. You can't get those non-verbal cues and you can't fully establish if the patient's getting any help. But this patient I had already, we knew he had generally good cognition skills and he was able to follow the assessment over the phone. So again, I sent him sections via email that he needed to do himself. I prompted him not to look at the questions beforehand and to look at the certain questions as we went along. Once it was completed, he took a picture of it all and sent it back to me. So functional assessment ideas and examples. So kitchen tasks, these can be done via video call quite easily if the carer is present. So the carer can video the patient whilst completing the task, and the therapist on the other end can be given the appropriate prompts if required. My colleague has started to complete planning sessions prior to their assessments with the patient and carer regarding positioning of the camera, what the task is going to involve, and if there's anything that the carer needs to do specifically. With these sessions, you can also incorporate attention and executive skill assessment within this. So you can add in distractions, ask the patient questions while they're completing the task, and add in problem-solving elements just as you would face-to-face. My other colleague has completed a joint cooking session with the patient. They've both been cooking in their own kitchens at the same time, working through the steps and evaluating the performance as they went along. The patient had great feedback about this. He felt that he had to work really hard because at the end the bakes were rated and they were rated on presentation and rise, so he felt the pressure. You could observe any leisure activities the patient does in their home and also medication management via video and be assessing sequencing, attention and executive skills. You could also ask the carer to video the task and send it to you via email, and you can evaluate this later on together. It can be used as an insight tool as well for the patient. So attention and processing examples. So you could use auditory target tasks and visual target tasks as well. For example, you could read a story to the patient via video call, giving the patient a target word to listen out for. The patient has to shout out or mark down how many times they heard that word as you're reading the story out. For further assessment of divided attention, you could ask them if they can recall other parts of the story as well as the target words. And to grade this up, you can use more than one target word or add in distractions throughout. For a visual target task, you could hold up a varying sequence of pictures to the camera, asking the patient to pay attention and answer questions at the end. The questions could be, how many times did you see a certain picture? What picture did I show you after the dog? What was the fourth picture I showed you, for example? For the divided attention, you could give the patient two tasks to do at once. So for example, a letter cancellation sheet with a target letter and listening to a story. So they have to listen for a target word there or recall parts of the story. Or you can ask the patient to switch from one task to another, picking out certain details from each. We quite frequently use attention card games, which assess processing and attention, and we've done these via video call as well. Another example, my colleagues used a return to driving and attention assessment. So she supported the patient to set up a simulated car environment in the lounge, and the patient's given scenarios to follow whilst completing an attention exercise. For example, moving your hand from gear stick to wheel and putting effort on the brake when certain target words are said. So for memory, you could use recall tasks with pictures or recall tasks with verbal stories or words. So again, holding up the pictures to the screen or giving the patient 5 words at the beginning of the session and asking the patient to try and remember these for later. And after a set period of time, asking patients to recall that information. You can assess their use of compensatory strategies. So giving them the first task with the picture, for example, asking them to use chunking or visual imagery to try and remember the pictures, and then testing this after a set period. You can also do memory games like matching pairs or Kim's game as well via video. So moving on to executive functioning examples. So for a higher level patient of mine, I've been sending him weekly tasks to do via email, which have included problem solving tasks and organisational tasks. And on our telephone call, we've gone through each exercise one by one, and he's evaluated his responses and rated himself on how he managed the tasks. It's been really good for his self-monitoring. A patient could give the therapist a task to complete during the session, directing them at each step and stage for a sequencing assessment. My colleagues have done money management assessments and return to work assessments as well, which could include things like asking them to make up certain amounts of money in change, completing budgeting worksheets, computer-based tasks, assessing organisational skills. For apraxia, the Tulia screening tool can be done quite easily via video call, so you're assessing their gestures and copying of movements. You could set up an object recognition task. You could ask the carer to lay out lots of household items on the table in front of them, position so the camera can see the items, and the therapist to ask to identify an item for a particular function. So you'd ask, what would you use to clean your teeth? Point to the food item. You could complete a task for the patient to watch whilst adding sequencing errors and using the wrong objects, for example, and asking the patient to identify what went wrong, what should have been done instead, and what objects should I have used. And you can also do sequencing picture cards as well via video. Finally, visuospatial and perception examples. So we've been sending patients paper-based tasks. So for example, the line bisection and star cancellation via emails for inattention, and the carer can be there to help support that task and feedback. They can either hold it up to the camera or send it back to us. You could show complex distorted images to the camera. You could do colour perception tasks to the camera and ask the patient to identify. You could prompt the carer to set up a busy environment in front of the patient and ask them to put items in different planes and positions to their norm. And you asking the patient then, can you identify individual items in that busy background? You can turn this into a functional task with the kitchen environment. So asking the carer to make the kitchen perceptually challenging and then observe them doing a task. So you're looking for, can they find the items? Can they identify objects? And are they using tools appropriately? For example, pouring a kettle, you can assess their depth perception. So that was just a really quick rundown of some examples that we've used to assess varying cognitive domains. But there's many more ideas and many more that are being created daily using the same principles. So going forward, we aim to continue using video and remote working as an additional follow-up to face-to-face. And hopefully by that, we can have more therapy and be having more input with our patients. So thank you to my OT colleagues within the team for sharing their experiences of remote working for this presentation. For any additional advice on how we've managed it, or even to share your examples and ideas with us, please email me in the email below or access remote rehab at www.rrc.life and share your ideas and questions to the network.